Dead America. Traverse City, Part 2, Day 0 plus 18. Dawn broke over the still waters of the lake, casting a warm golden light across its surface. Kip and Isabel sat side by side on the edge of their boat, fishing lines dangling into the water. The last few weeks had been challenging for them. They were part of a floating community comprised of a dozen boats lashed together. The floating community being home to around 25 survivors. Sometimes, I wonder how much longer we can keep going like this, Kip said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's getting harder to survive. Isabel nodded, her blonde hair catching the first rays of sunlight. I know, and it's not just the practical stuff. We need to find a way to get along with everyone else. Tensions are running high, Kip agreed, remembering the quarrels that seemed to break out daily among the group. He glanced at the other boats, which bobbed gently in the water. So many people crammed into such a small space, all trying to stay alive. It was a recipe for disaster. Maybe we can try talking to some of the others, see if we can work things out, he suggested. Ever the diplomat. Maybe, she replied, her voice trailing off as she stared at the empty water around her hook. Just then, Skylar emerged from below decks, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Her brown hair was tousled from sleep, and she stretched her arms above her head as she greeted them. Morning, guys. How's the fishing? Nothing so far, Kip admitted, frowning at his untouched line. That's 4 days in a row now. Food supplies are running low too, Isabel added. We'll be completely out within a week at this rate. Skylar's brow furrowed with concern as she joined them at the edge of the boat. She peered down into the water, as if willing the fish to appear. We need a plan then. We can't keep going like this. Kip nodded, his mind already racing with ideas. He knew that it would take more than just luck and hope to keep them alive. They needed a solid strategy, but he also knew that rallying everyone together wouldn't be easy. Let's see if we can come up with something, he suggested. We'll need everyone's help, but I think we can do it. Right, Skylar agreed, her voice firm and resolute. We've survived this long. We're not giving up now. As the sun continued to rise, bathing their floating community in light, the three of them began to brainstorm ideas. It was a daunting task, but they were determined to find a way to ensure their survival. Let's talk to Christian and Marcus, Kip suggested, casting a determined glance at Isabel and Skylar. They might have some ideas on what we can do. Good idea, Skylar said, brushing back a loose strand of her brunette hair. We need all the help we can get. The three of them made their way across the floating community, stepping carefully from boat to boat as they greeted their fellow survivors. Kip noticed the weariness in everyone's eyes, but he also saw a flicker of hope, a testament to the human spirit, even in the darkest times. Morning, Linda, Kip called out to an older woman who was tending to a makeshift garden. She smiled weakly in return, a feeble reminder of the warmth she used to exude before the world fell apart. Christian and Marcus should be in the main cabin, Isabel said, pointing to the central boat that served as their de facto command center. As they descended into the cabin, Kip felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He knew that every decision they made could mean life or death for the people counting on them. They found Christian and Marcus hunched over a map of Traverse City, deep in discussion. The two men were polar opposites, Christian being burly and gruff, while Marcus was tall and impeccably groomed, even amidst the apocalypse. Despite their differences, they had become unlikely leaders of the community, their combined skills keeping them all alive thus far. Hey guys, Kip said, drawing their attention. We need to talk about our food situation. Just the people we wanted to see, Christian replied, his voice rough but not unkind. Pull up a seat. Isabel and Skylar joined them at the table, their expressions a mixture of determination and apprehension. Kip couldn't blame them. He felt the same way. They were walking a tightrope between life and death, and every choice they made could send them spiraling into oblivion. Fish aren't biting. Kip began, his voice calm but firm. We've got maybe a week's worth of food left. Christian and Marcus exchanged glances, their faces creased with worry. It was clear they had been discussing the same issue before Kip and the others arrived. "Been working on that," Marcus said, tapping the map with an ink-stained finger. "We've circled a few possible locations to scout for supplies." Kip leaned in, studying the marked spots. Grocery stores, pharmacies, even a high-rise apartment complex. Each one represented a chance at survival, but also a significant risk. Going ashore meant facing the undead hordes that had driven them to seek refuge on the water in the first place. "Let's figure out our best option," Kip said, meeting the eyes of each person at the table. "We need to be smart about this." The room filled with tense silence as they contemplated their next move. "So really, no luck with the fishing?" Marcus asked, his brow furrowed as he glanced to Kip, not really believing his earlier report. "Nothing," Kip replied, trying to keep the frustration out of his voice. "That's 4 days in a row." Christian leaned back in his chair, his burly arms crossed over his chest. "We can't keep going like this. We have to go ashore." There was no disagreement around the table. They all knew the necessity of their situation. The tension in the air was palpable, and Kip took a deep breath before speaking up. "All right, what have we got?" he asked, gesturing to the map strewn across the table. 3 grocery stores, a pharmacy, and a high-rise apartment complex," Marcus answered, tracing the circled locations with his finger. "All potential sources of supplies or shelter." "Shelter?" Kip raised an eyebrow. "You think we should consider moving on land?" "I do. But not everybody agrees," Christian said firmly, glancing over towards Marcus. "Life on the water isn't sustainable long-term." He glanced at Isabel and Skylar, trying to gauge their reactions. Both women were wearing expressions of uncertainty, but neither voiced any objections. Kip nodded in agreement. "Food first," Marcus interjected gruffly. "We don't know how much longer our current supplies will last." Kip could see the logic behind Marcus's priority, but the idea of securing a safe haven on land nagged at him. They went back and forth for a moment, their arguments growing more heated as each tried to sway the other. "Enough," Skylar snapped, her brown eyes flashing with irritation. "Look." She pointed at the map, her finger landing on a grocery store a few blocks from the apartment complex. "If we check this place out, we'll be close enough to scope out the apartments too. 2 birds with 1 stone. Assuming it's still stocked," Marcus grumbled. But he didn't argue further. Kip nodded in agreement, grateful for Skylar's intervention. "Let's focus on what's most important right now. Food and a potential safe haven." He looked around the table, meeting each person's gaze. "We don't know what we're going to find out there, but we have to try. For all of us." The others exchanged cautious glances before nodding in unison, their faces etched with determination. It was settled. They would venture ashore, into the unknown, driven by hope and the will to survive. "Skylar, you're missing the point," Marcus sneered, his condescension dripping from every word. "Staying on land is just too dangerous. We need to prioritize food first." He paused, turning his attention back to the map as if to dismiss her argument entirely. "I've been talking to some survivors on land with my CB radio. It's not looking good. A couple of them went radio silent over the last week. Dead, most likely." Kip could see Skylar bristle at Marcus's tone, her jaw clenching tightly. Despite her youth, she had proven her worth in this hellish new world time and time again. Her barista days might be long gone, but she had never lost that fiery spirit that made her stand up to rude customers without faltering. "Nice to know you care so much about our fellow survivors," she shot back icily. "But we can't live like this forever, Marcus. We need a plan, and we need to be smart about it. Food won't mean anything if we don't have a safe place to eat it. Plus, at some point, we're going to have to think long-term," Kip replied. "That means growing our own stuff. Even if those grocery stores are fully packed, the food inside isn't going to last forever." The atmosphere inside the cabin grew tense as they locked gazes, neither willing to back down. It was Christian who broke the silence, leaning in and clearing his throat. "Look, we need to find out more about what's happening on land. What have these survivors told you, Marcus?" "Anything useful," Headshots, Marcus said, his eyes still locked on Skylar. They're slow now, but headshots are the only way to take them down for good, and there are a lot of them in town, especially in the downtown area. It's crawling with those things. Slow, Kip muttered, his brow furrowing as he tried to picture the shambling hordes of undead. That's new. That means we might have a better chance of evading them if we're careful. As long as there aren't too many of them, Christian added darkly. Doesn't matter if they're slow, if there are hundreds of them. Kip glanced around the table, taking stock of everyone. As he looked at each person, Skylar, still fuming from Marcus's condescension, Christian, his eyes betraying the fear he tried so hard to hide, and Marcus, smug but undeniably resourceful. He knew this was going to be an uphill battle. But they had to try. All right, he said finally, his voice steady and determined. We'll focus on food first, but we won't disregard the possibility of finding a safe place on land. We need both if we want any chance at surviving this nightmare. He could see the reluctant agreement in their eyes. And deep down, he hoped that their united front would be enough to see them through the horrors that awaited them on land. All right, Kip said, steeling himself against the tension in the room. We need to decide who's going on this mission. Obviously, I'm going, Christian declared, his rough voice leaving no room for debate. Me too, Marcus chimed in, a smug grin dancing across his face as if he were looking forward to the challenge. Count me in, Skylar interjected, her brown eyes flashing with determination. Absolutely not, Marcus scoffed, eyeing her up and down as if she were little more than an inconvenience. Excuse me, she snapped, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. I'm just as capable as any of you, and I won't be left behind. Skylar, it's dangerous out there, Kip began, but she cut him off. Save it, Kip. I'm coming, whether Marcus likes it or not. Her glare dared him to argue further, and Kip knew better than to push her. Fine, he relented, turning to Isabel. What about you? Isabel hesitated, worry creasing her brow. I want to help, but I don't know if I can handle all that. Stay here, Kip suggested gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. Monitor the radio and keep an ear out for any useful information. We'll need your support from here. Are you sure? She asked, biting her lip. Positive, he reassured her with a small smile. We're counting on you, Isabel. Okay, she breathed, her shoulders relaxing slightly as she accepted her role. With their roles decided, the group gathered what few weapons they had, baseball bats, crowbars, and Marcus's prized handgun, and made their way through the interconnected boats towards Kip's vessel. The sound of water lapping against the hulls and the distant cries of seagulls served as a grim reminder of the world they'd left behind. Ready? Christian asked, his burly form casting a shadow over the group as they prepared to cast off. Let's do this, Kip affirmed, his heart hammering in his chest. He knew the risks and the horrors that awaited them on shore, but he refused to let fear dictate their survival. As the boat pulled away from the makeshift flotilla, Kip couldn't help but glance back at Isabel's retreating figure. The worry in her eyes mirrored his own thoughts, but he pushed them aside, focusing on the task at hand. Their lives depended on it. The boat's engine hummed softly as it idled a few hundred yards from shore. Kip raised the binoculars to his eyes, scanning the docks for any signs of movement. Most of the boats were long gone, leaving behind a desolate scene filled with moaning, shuffling figures. Looks like we got about a dozen zombies wandering around, Kip murmured, his voice tense as he focused on the task ahead. Christian, standing nearby, gritted his teeth in anticipation. All right, let's draw them into the water and clear a path, he suggested, his gruff voice carrying an air of determination. Skylar and Marcus nodded in agreement, each gripping their respective weapons tightly. Kip steered the boat closer, staying a cautious 50 yards from the dock. As they approached, Marcus began banging a metal pipe against the side of the boat, while Skylar joined in by stomping her feet on the deck. The noise quickly attracted the attention of the zombies, who lurched towards the source of the commotion, mindlessly walking off the dock and plunging into the water. "Keep it up," Kip shouted, sweat beading on his forehead as he expertly maneuvered the boat through the chaos. The group continued to make noise, luring more of the undead creatures away from their destination. It wasn't long before splashes filled the air, their rotting corpses hitting the water. Once most of the docks were cleared, Kip guided the boat to the other side, where a small bay offered a safe place to park. He killed the engine, leaving only the sound of gentle waves lapping against the hull. "Nice work, everyone," he praised quietly, not wanting to attract any unwanted attention. His heart raced as he prepared for the next step in their dangerous excursion. Christian, always eager for action, was the first to disembark, clutching his baseball bat tightly as he approached a stray zombie that had become entangled in some rope near the dock. With a swift, brutal swing, he cracked the creature's skull open, its lifeless body slumping to the ground. "Coast is clear," Christian grunted, looking back at the boat with an intense expression. Kip, Skylar, and Marcus followed suit, stepping onto the dock with trepidation. "Stay sharp," Kip reminded them, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings as they made their way onto land. The overpowering stench of decay assaulted their senses, a grim reminder of the world that awaited them. "Let's find that grocery store and get the hell out of here," Marcus muttered, his eyes narrow and alert. He gripped his handgun tightly, ready for anything. "And the apartments," Skylar chimed in, her voice steady despite the fear she felt deep down. Marcus sneered, but gave a half-hearted nod in agreement. As they moved forward, Kip couldn't help but think about Isabel, left behind to monitor the radio. He hoped they could complete their mission quickly and return to relative safety. But for now, all he could do was focus on the present, navigating the dangers of this decaying world with his makeshift family. The 4 survivors pressed onward, the sun casting long shadows across the charred parking lot. The sight of burnt-out vehicles and shattered glass was a testament to humanity's futile attempts to escape the apocalypse. Kip's eyes fixed on an upside-down car, its blackened husk, a likely source of the inferno that had consumed the lot. "Looks like we won't be driving anywhere," Skylar observed grimly, her voice echoing slightly in the eerie silence. "Didn't expect it to be this bad," Christian muttered, his grip on the baseball bat tightening. "Focus. We need to keep moving," Kip urged, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He unfolded the map, careful not to let any part of it flutter in the breeze and attract unwanted attention. "Grocery store is 2 miles away, just outside downtown," he explained, pointing to their destination on the map. "Great. So we're hoofing it then," Marcus said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "How about we take the direct path? It's shorter." "We stay on the outer road," Kip insisted, resisting the urge to snap back at Marcus. "If we get overwhelmed, we can always retreat into the water." "Fine. Whatever," Marcus grumbled, clearly unhappy but offering no further argument. The group walked slowly along the outer road around town, taking in the sights and trying to keep their heads on a swivel in case of danger. "Let's pick up the pace," Christian said, glancing around the desolate landscape warily. "Don't want to risk getting caught out here after dark." "Agreed," Skylar chimed in, her expression hardening as she quickened her step. "Stay close and keep your eyes and ears open," Kip instructed, leading the group along the outer road. He knew his plan wasn't perfect, but it was all they had. The devastation before them was a grim reminder of the world they now inhabited. Kip led the group past overturned cars, their metal frames twisted and charred from fires long since extinguished. Broken windows gaped like hollow eyes in the crumbling buildings, while lifeless bodies littered the streets and sidewalks, some half-eaten, others disturbingly intact. "Man, this place is hell on earth," Skylar murmured, her voice barely audible as she surveyed the desolation. "Keep moving," Christian urged, his grip on the baseball bat tight enough to turn his knuckles white. As they continued along the outer road, they noticed dozens of zombies milling about, but thankfully none blocked their path. That is, until they spotted a massive horde in front of a building up ahead. The sheer number of undead, easily several hundred strong, made Kip's stomach churn with dread. "Damn," Skylar whispered, her eyes wide with horror. "I wonder what they're after." "Could be other survivors trapped in there," Kip replied, putting a grim thought in everyone's mind. "Or it could be a trap," Marcus interjected, his brow furrowed in thought. "We don't know what might be waiting for us if we try to help." Marcus is right, Kip reluctantly agreed, his heart heavy with the knowledge that they couldn't afford to take unnecessary risks. "We need to stay focused on our objective." "Fine," Skylar conceded, though her expression remained troubled. "But if we find anyone who we can get to, who needs help, we're not leaving them behind." "Deal," Kip said with a nod, trying to quell the unease gnawing at him. They pressed on, eventually arriving at the street where the apartment high-rise stood. Its once imposing structure now marred by decay. About 20 zombies roamed the area, their shuffling gait and guttural moans sending shivers down Kip's spine. "All right, we need a plan to get inside," he said, his gaze flicking between the undead and the building. "I suggest we head for the parking deck over there. It's closest to us and might offer a way in." "What about the grocery store?" Marcus complained. "It's up on the next block," Skylar retorted. "We might as well check the apartments out first." "Well, we don't have keys to get in," Marcus pointed out, his tone dripping with disdain. Kip held up his baseball bat, a determined glint in his eye. "Here's my key." "Subtle," Skylar remarked, her lips curling into a wry smile. "But it might just work." "Fine," Marcus grumbled, though the uneasy glances he cast towards the approaching zombies betrayed his skepticism. With their makeshift plan in place, Kip knew they had little choice but to see it through. They needed food, supplies, and a potential new home. As daunting as the task before them seemed, failure was not an option. Kip's heart pounded in his chest as they sprinted towards the parking deck, the sound of their footfalls echoing off the concrete walls. Christian and Marcus dealt with any zombies that crossed their path, their bats connecting with rotting flesh and bone, causing a sickening crunch that Kip couldn't help but wince at. "Stay focused," he told himself, gripping his bat tighter, sweat dampening his palms. The distant moans of the undead sent shivers down his spine, but he knew they couldn't afford to lose momentum. As they reached the second floor of the parking deck, Kip spotted a door that seemed to lead inside. A couple more zombies shuffled about near the entrance, and Marcus and Christian took them down with efficient brutality. Kip raised his bat, swung, and shattered glass on the door. The noise was jarring, but necessary. "Go!" he yelled, urging the others through the broken doorway. Skylar slipped past him first, her face pale but determined. Marcus followed closely, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Christian was the last to enter, narrowly avoiding the grasping hands of the pursuing mob. "Quick! Barricade the door!" Kip shouted, and together they shoved a nearby bench into the hole, wedging it tight against the shattered doorframe. The groaning and clawing from the other side grew louder, but the makeshift barrier held. "Everyone all right?" Kip asked, scanning his companions' faces for signs of injury. They each nodded in turn, though exhaustion marred their features. "Let's keep moving," Christian said, his voice gruff. "We need to find what we came here for." "Right," Kip agreed, wiping the sweat from his brow. Deep down, he knew that the real challenge had only just begun, but they couldn't afford to falter now, not with so much at stake. "We'll have to be careful. There could be more of them inside. Stick together and stay quiet," Marcus added, his eyes darting around the dimly lit interior. "The last thing we need is to alert more than we have to." "Agreed," Skylar whispered, her voice barely audible over the incessant moaning of the trapped zombies. Kip took a deep breath, steeling himself for the unknown dangers that lay ahead. He knew they couldn't afford any mistakes, not in this nightmarish world where death lurked around every corner. With a silent nod, he led the group further into the building, each step bringing them closer to their goal. or perhaps their doom. Kip led the group down the hallway, his bat gripped tightly in his hand. They entered a vast common area on the second floor, where office spaces and a gym were scattered around an open floor plan. A railing ran along the edge of the room, overlooking the first floor below. "Stay alert," Kip whispered to the others as they crept forward. He flinched at the echo of his own voice in the empty space. "We don't know what's waiting for us here." As if on cue, a handful of zombies stumbled out from the dim corners of the room. Kip's heart skipped a beat, but he forced himself to focus. Each swing of the bat connected with a sickening crunch, sending the undead creatures sprawling to the ground. The others fought just as fiercely, their weapons cracking skulls and crushing bones until the last zombie lay still at their feet. "Looks like we've got company downstairs," Skylar said, her breaths coming in short gasps. She pointed towards the railing where a cacophony of moans and shuffling rose from the first floor. The group approached the railing cautiously, peering down into the darkness below. What they saw made their blood run cold. Hundreds of zombies, packed together so tightly it was impossible to see the floor beneath them. The sight was horrifying, but their moans intensified as they caught sight of the living humans above. "Jesus Christ," Kip muttered under his breath, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the railing. "Look at them all," Christian whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and terror. "Why are there so many in one place?" "Safe haven refuge," Marcus said, his tone grim. "One of my friends on the CB radio mentioned something about the locals announcing places like this for people to go for safety. They didn't realize that bites were lethal, though." He shook his head in disbelief. "It must set off a chain reaction. People bitten turned into zombies and then attacked others." "God, that's horrible," Skylar murmured, her eyes wide with horror as she stared at the sea of undead below. Kip couldn't help but agree, the weight of their mission heavier on his shoulders now. They had to find what they came for, not just for the sake of their community, but for all those who had died here, in this supposed safe haven. Swallowing hard, Kip turned away from the railing, his resolve strengthened by the nightmare unfolding beneath them. "Let's keep moving," he said, his voice firm. "We can't help them, but we can still help our people back home." "All right, so going down there isn't an option," Kip said. "We need a new plan." "Damn right we do," Christian agreed, wiping sweat from his brow. Skylar's eyes darted around the room, seeking any possible escape routes. "Maybe we can find another way out of this building, or at least somewhere to hole up for now." "Good idea," Kip replied, feeling the burden of responsibility as the leader of their small group. He knew they needed to act fast, yet stay calm and collected, lest panic set in. "Let's check those office spaces over there," Marcus suggested, pointing to a row of doors on the far side of the room. "There might be a back exit or something." Before they could take a single step, however, a deafening crash echoed through the hallway from where they had entered. All four of them spun around, instinctively gripping their weapons tighter. "Shit," Skylar hissed, her eyes widening in terror as a mob of zombies surged into view, shambling towards them in overwhelming numbers. "God damn it," Christian muttered, raising his bat in readiness. "Looks like we're not getting out that way." Kip's mind raced, adrenaline surging through his veins as he assessed the situation. There was no time for fear, only action. He glanced back at the railing, then at the offices Marcus had mentioned earlier. Neither seemed like a viable option anymore. "Get ready, everyone," he shouted, trying to project confidence despite the fear gnawing at him. "We fight our way out. Together." "Wait, Kip." Skylar tried to interrupt, but he was already swinging his bat at the first zombie to reach them, connecting with a sickening crunch. In that moment, all thoughts of escape and rescue operations were gone, replaced by the primal need to survive. Each member of the group fought fiercely, their weapons smashing into undead skulls and limbs as they tried to carve a path through the horde. "Focus on the ones closest to us," Marcus yelled, his condescending tone momentarily forgotten in the heat of battle. "Don't get surrounded." Kip could feel the strain in his arms as he delivered blow after blow, each impact jarring him to the core. He knew that exhaustion would set in soon, but he couldn't allow himself to falter. The lives of his friends and the entire community depended on them making it out alive. "Stay close," he shouted, his voice raw with determination. "We'll make it through this." As they battled on, Kip couldn't help but wonder if they'd ever find the supplies and sanctuary they needed, or if they were doomed to the same fate as those who had sought refuge in this forsaken building. This is the end of part 2. Will Kip and his determined group survive the zombie onslaught? Tune in to episode 3 to find out.